Have I told you about the app that we're launching in May? It's an AI powered self discovery coach, and the feedback that we're getting has been crazy. Let me give you some. It literally felt like I was talking to a therapist. I loved it. Someone even shared an example of how they used it. So I told the app I don't like confrontation, and that's why I often don't know how to talk to others about how I feel because I don't like arguing. I loved how it literally walked me through how I can start a conversation without feeling like it was going to be a confrontation. Someone else. Love, love, love it. Congrats again. This is going to be great. It launches in May, and I couldn't be more hyped for you to use it. If you haven't already and you want to be the first one to be able to use this, sign up for the app launch waitlist, which is in the show notes, or you can visit our website at plural.com.
I didn't even realize it was racist until I started getting to high school and I started learning more about race relations and like how this shit really worked. You know what I'm saying? Because I was just like, hey, there's a complete misalignment between like how I'm perceiving myself and how this system is perceiving me, right?
All right, so I always start with the same question, right? So authenticity. It's a buzzword you probably hear all the time, but what does it mean to you when you hear it?
Like in a work context, like
However you want.
it depends on who said it.
What do you mean?
I think there.
I know where you're going with it.
Yeah, I'm kind of like, there are a few words that I'm realizing have vastly different meanings, right? Like when you're code switching, right?
Yeah.
Culture. I didn't realize till I came back to the States, and I came back. I was in Europe for 8 years. 5 years in Paris, 3 years in Amsterdam, global lead on Adidas out in Amsterdam, etc. And I came back, end of 2020, and I didn't realize that people started calling target audiences culture. Because to me, culture, and I'm a academic first, right? I'm a Black Studies major at Amherst College. I wrote a book. I have a master's degree in global communications. Like, I'm much more in anthropology, sociology, interpersonal relationships and things of that nature. So to me, culture is the rituals, artifacts, music, food, customs that keep communities together, right? There are things that they're sacred. You know what I mean? Like, you think about, something as simple as, when you're in the Netherlands, they do one cheek kiss for acquaintances and three cheeks for family, right? In France, it's two. Or you go to the other side of the spectrum and you go to, you know, braids and slavery, where people are drawing out maps of escaping plantations with cornrows. Or you go to a more modern example. I was listening to a conversation about Hailey Bieber and her like natural aesthetic, but her like comb back hair aesthetic is really born from laid edges, and it still comes from the Black community, right? So when to use Annex 88 as an example, like before I got here, this was like a culture agency, social, whatever, and they were like, we like to hack culture. I'm like, you gonna hack my bar mitzvah? You know what I'm saying? Like, why would you hack it, right? That's the thing that's keeping people alive. When you migrate from a pueblo in Oaxaca and walk your way to San Francisco, and half the people that you was with died, and the other half you pay 5 racks to a coyote to get you across the border, and you're maintaining your culture by, having, soup on the night before Christmas, you gonna hack that? Like, what's more colonial? What's more out of tune with the word than that, right?
Yeah.
So authenticity, to me, the first thing I think of is just keeping it 100. You know what I'm saying? Like being yourself.
What about like your authenticity though? Like, how would people describe it? People that are close to you, like you, as your most authentic self.
Yeah, I mean, how I would like people to describe me, like, I think.
No, how would people describe it?
Yeah, I think they would say that I keep it pretty real. You know what I mean?
Okay. But like, funny, serious. Like, what are some adjectives?
Oh, what's my truest self?
Yeah,
At my best, definitely, definitely funny, telling a story,
Storyteller, okay.
Trying to bring some levity, trying to bring people together. I think a lot of energy, a lot of physicality. You know what I'm saying? I'll be
Okay.
hugging the shit out of people.
You embracing people?
Yeah. Like when it's like fam, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's like one of those things. Like I mentioned, code switching. Like for me, it's not like work or not work. Like it's so many facets, right? I was talking with a client, earlier, and she was like, "Oh, I'm from Vallejo," and I was like, "Oh, okay." The VLLEJ. Oh, Vallejo. You know what I'm saying? Like growing up in the Bay, I grew up in the Mission. I went to French school as a kid. In the Haight.
Why did you go to French school?
If you think about private schools, my parents were looking at the public schools, when I was going into kindergarten, and they were like, hey, this is, not diverse enough, not, ticking the boxes for us. So let's look into private school, look into scholarship. And obviously, at the time there was only two full immersion programs. There was French American and Buena Vista. Now there's a few other programs. But they saw value in that,
Yeah.
But it wasn't like my parents are French or anything like that. But you imagine me, right? Like, so I'm at home. I played soccer, on a team that was so Spanish and Hispanic. I learned Spanish playing soccer because I just was like, bro, I don't know what y'all saying.
Right.
Like I gotta figure this out. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Then I go to school, French school, and then eventually I go to school in Marin, where I went to a prep school essentially in Marin with, kids whose houses is $20 million, like the son of the Martinelli's Apple Juice, you know what I mean? Phil Lesh's son from the Grateful Dead was in my class, you know what I'm saying? And then I'm going to hoop, and I'm hooping with, my team. I played on the Bay Area Ballers. At the time, we were the second best team in the Bay. The number one team was the Soldiers. The year before, they had LeBron.
That's crazy.
So it's like Cass from Oakland, Roger Craig's son, was on our team. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm just being all these different people.
At that point, were you like comparing yourself to those people?
I mean, I think it was just like a natural.
Of course.
I'm just naturally, I think, empathetic, and I want people to feel comfortable. So if I come in and I start speaking to you in a way that's super foreign to you, that's gonna make you uncomfortable.
Okay.
So when I do that, and I do that, right? Like I had just as an example, I got on a call when I was running the Las Vegas business over at Gray, and I was like, so Dipset or the Locks, like who won the battle? And literally one of the, a white lady who was on the call was like, hey, Andre, I don't think you're on mute. And I was like, no, I'm asking y'all. You know what I mean? Like it was whatever day it was. You remember there was the verses. I was like, this is the most important thing that happened. Y'all all live in New York. This is the most important thing that happened in culture yesterday. And you want me to not ask you because you assume that it was a question for black people? You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm like, that's crazy. But I know you wouldn't know the answer, but I'm going to ask you on purpose. In the same way that, the first time when I went to Amherst College and I went to a party and I start playing Sweet Home Alabama and people are screaming at the top of their lungs and I'm sitting there saying, I'm like, it's like one other black dude. I'm like,
yeah, what's good with this?
you don't know this either, right? So, for me, that's just a gift, I think, from the Bay, right? Like there's a lot of gifts of the Bay, the ability to talk, the ability to get in where you fit in, and so I think authenticity is a really interesting thing, right? Because I'm never not myself, and I'm very conscious of being that. But I think, you don't have to forcefully be yourself in all situations, right? Let's just say, to be extreme, say I was a nudist.
Sure.
If I'm gonna forcefully be a nudist in hella situation, I'm gonna end up arrested.
Sure, of course.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That doesn't mean you're not a nudist. That could just be who you are.
Right.
But let's just make people feel comfortable because you probably could get away with being a nudist in more situations than you would think if you start with, let me meet you where you're at and walk you further to where I'm at.
So you're like playing sports, you're starting to go to private school, and you start really like expanding the types of people that you're around, right? And you said that early on there was a little bit of comparison though. Like in what ways do you think you were comparing yourself to others? which is natural. We all do. Yeah.
I mean, tell me more about the question, right? Comparative in what way? Like, how do I fit in this culture? Like, what do you mean by that?
So I mean, I remember when I what you mean by that? Yeah. I remember when I went to college and
Where'd you go to college?
I went to Northeastern in Boston.
Okay, yeah.
Shout out to Massachusetts. Yeah.
I mean, shout out to Massachusetts. It's crazy.
I mean, that is good. That's kinda crazy.
when people tell me they're from Boston, I say I'm sorry.
Boston's a cool place though, but
It is, but also I think
it has a history.
New
of
England
being
is
racist,
the second most racist place in America.
Yeah.
In my opinion, besides the South.
The best secret in Boston, Cape Verdean culture.
I was gonna say the Cape Verdeans
That
getting
is
jiggy. Yeah,
crazy.
yeah.
You ever get that little pasada?
Yeah,
That shit
see?
fire.
That's what I'm saying. So that, yes, but that's like existing in resistance. You know what I'm saying? Like the general culture.
Sure. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Of Massachusetts leaves a little bit to be desired. Also, flame me up if you want to, but we could talk about it. I really spent a lot of time out there. Not you. I'm talking about that.
Oh yeah.
Whoever's watching.
But what I was saying about like comparison, for example, I don't know, you're in school and there's not a lot of people that look like you out there, and then you also realize like, oh shit, these people are from like specific legacy last names or whatever, and you're just like, damn, like I didn't do that. I didn't get access to that, and then I'm like starting to feel bad about myself. Any of those sort of things, maybe. And you probably didn't.
Yeah. I don't think that's how it happened for me.
Okay.
For better, for worse, you know what I mean? In my head, at least. Like, you know, I think first and foremost, you know, growing up, going to French school, and the French schooling system is really specific, right? You go to class, you have a lined notebook, you have a 4-color pen, and you literally copy down all the notes. Like the teacher writes the exact notes on the board, you just copy them down.
Also, it wasn't just like you learning French, like it was like French style education.
It was so kindergarten to 3rd grade is half an hour of English a day, and the
Okay.
rest is all French.
Wow.
And it's a private school for Americans and a public school for French people. So it's a full French curriculum. So when I meet a French person, I'm like brevet de collège, like baccalaureate, like I know the same things you know, but I also learned all the American shit, you know? So in that system, me, you know, whether it's a mix of, you know, whether I'm inherently creative, generationally creative, whether it's, you know, ADHD as a superpower, and also like I'm a very, very quick thinker. And so the combination of all those things, like, Andre, you're in trouble. What do I do now? Why are you writing in green? I'm like, I ran out of black and blue. Like, what? They're like, oh my, what? Like, they don't get why I wouldn't get a different pen. I don't get why I wouldn't just write it in green. It's still written, right?
Right. But they're very specific about
Everything has to be, you know, square. You know, you're judged off of how far you are in the margins, cursive, things like that.
right. And you as a creative person, you're just like, what's the difference? But
I
this
don't
looks
even
cool
get it.
or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. On the flip side, I also, you know, and look, you're talking about an environment where there are no bad kids. You know, when I started meeting kids in middle school, like there are no kids doing real life bad shit. You know what I'm saying? When I you know started hooping in middle school and meeting different kids, I'm like, you know, they're in 6th grade talking about, oh yeah, we went to a party, or like I'm like, what? You're
Wait, 6th
drinking?
grade?
Yeah, I'm like, that's crazy. I don't know about that. You know what I mean? Like, so there wasn't anyone to point to, I think, to be the worst of a bunch, right? Because any data set, there's someone who's the best and someone who's the worst. Not on purpose. It just kind of is what it is.
Yeah. And most of us are in the middle. Probably,
Right.
You know? Yeah.
I think that the adults around me, you know what I mean, were like, you are the most glaring of whatever it is, and so I was constantly in trouble, you know, and it was just
For what though?
I mean, the simple version is when you go learn, like, you know, I learned my 9 times tables. Like, I remember this pretty vividly. Like, you explain, you're like 9 times 1, 9 times 2 is 18. I'm like, okay, bet. Then they go explain it 4 more times. I'm like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing these 4 other times because you already explained it the first time. So what are we doing now? So now I'm occupying myself. You know what I'm saying? Whether, you know, and nothing bad. It's just like, I tried all, you know, I bring another book to class, start reading that. You can't do that because also it's the French thing, right? You can't go what you doing reading Huckleberry Finn? I'm like, okay,
Right,
I
right,
already understood what you was explaining. I'm sorry that Jacob doesn't understand. Teach him. I'll just read this.
right,
No, you
right.
can't do that. My parents are like, oh, give him more work. No, we can't do that. Okay, I'll talk to this person. Oh, Andre, why you just? I'm like, okay, this is not adding up. You know
Yeah,
what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it's funny because I had other classmates that got accelerated. You know what I'm saying? They had extra English, extra math, whatever it might have been. But the combination of things kind of was just like, nah, you're a bad kid. Like, you're getting in trouble. I heard about you from last year, heard about your other teachers. And, you know, what's so crazy about all of that is I didn't even realize it was racist until I started getting to high school and I started learning more about race relations and like how this shit really worked. You know what I'm saying? Because
Interesting.
I was just like, hey, there's a complete misalignment between like how I'm perceiving myself and how this system is perceiving me, right? And like I think like that's like the question of authenticity, right? Like I always come back to like Bell Hooks, you know, she talks about oppositional gaze, right? Which is really in a female context, but it works, I think, in any like underrepresented or have not context, right? Like if I go into a room and I start talking loud and screaming because I'm listening to a basketball game in my ears,
Yeah.
everybody is white in the room, they panic. Oh shit, it's a nigga yelling, ah, what's going on, right? Oppositional gaze is like I'm observing myself from the third person, right? And I think that's the pinnacle of like white masculinity and white heteronormative, you know, masculinity is like you're never forced to see yourself in the third person because you're never in misalignment. Like everyone, you are Phil. They always think you're Phil, right? Like I was in a meeting yesterday. We had the North American Creative Council, and we were talking about appraisal bias and how people had to take, you know, their photos out of a home to get their home appraised, and it'd
Right,
be
right.
200K improved. And I was telling them, you know, the story of the first time I got called the N-word. When I got called the N-word
In high school?
nah, I was like in the 7th grade.
Okay.
Everything about me that made me Andre was suddenly gone.
What do you mean?
Like that's the feeling I had in that moment when they go, "You're a nigger," and I'm like, "Oh, so I'm not Andre. I don't have parents. I don't have any of those things. I don't speak French. I don't play soccer. None of that. I am just literally an idea of a thing that you don't like. But I'm the like you know you go from like generic like." You know, whatever it is to human, to genus, to like, you know what I'm saying? Like you boil me down to just being a placeholder. I'm just like a box.
And the lowest of those placeholders.
Right.
Right.
And so I think that's that misalignment, right? I think I'm Andre, but you think I'm this.
Right.
And that gap, when you feel that, then you start to see, oh, hold on, let me watch myself as I walk in this room.
So
let me
in
make sure I don't, right? It's not inauthentic. I think it's protective.
Right,
You know
right,
what
right.
I'm saying?
But in high school, when you started to learn about all of those things and started to see yourself from someone else's point of view, things started to change where you started to protect yourself a little bit more.
I'd like to say that. I think, you know, me as a more mature, slightly version of myself, I still look at myself like in high school and college and I'm like, damn, bro, you was kind of like doing a lot.
Like
you know?
what? Like you? So instead of
I
protecting,
just was a, you know, you have to imagine, right? I transferred in as a sophomore to a school that had 300 kids.
wait, and this was not a French school.
No, this is a regular American high school. Not regular. It's an American private school. The West Coast we don't have prep schools, but it's a prep school, right?
Yeah.
Like that's essentially the vibes, right? I've been to Deerfield. I've been to Exeter. Like that's the vibes. It's a
Gotcha.
whole ass campus.
Oh yeah,
There was
okay.
upper campus, lower campus. There's fields and grass.
Yeah, it's like a college campus. So there's one by me. It's called Fieldston.
Yeah.
in Riverdale. It's
I'm
crazy.
over here like, bro, y'all got a soccer field
Yeah,
on campus? What are you talking about?
it looked better than some colleges.
No, dead ass.
Yeah.
You know, so, but again, I'm myself and I'm 15, 14, whatever it is.
Sure.
I'm like, I'm showing up. I'm from the city, first of all. You know what I mean? I'm in Marin. I don't know what y'all doing. I'm from the city, bro. You know, and that's my energy. And then I like, you know, like I didn't wear the same shoes twice for 100 days of school. For the first 100 days. Do you imagine this kid who's, you know, grew up in Mill Valley,
Yeah.
And they probably wearing whatever they're wearing, you know, until they're choked up and died. They're like, I don't understand. They're like, why is your shirt so big? And I'm like, bro, why is your shirt so small? You know, why have you not washed your clothes? Like, you know what I mean? Like the cultural disconnect is like super wide. And like, you know.
It was at the time where you were learning about all these things, and I would think that from you learning that and you looking at yourself from someone else's point of view, you would go into like a bit of protection mode. But it sounds like you kind of went the opposite and you just leaned into.
No, I don't think it was that. Like I was trying to figure out who I was. You know what I mean? Like the biggest thing, right? Like I was born in New York, and my parents, you know, purposefully moved me from New York to San Francisco. And I think the big difference in growing up, and I'm greatly appreciative of growing up in San Francisco, because it allowed me to figure out who I was. I think New York, you're like 11 years old, and it's like, who are you? And you have to have an answer, otherwise it's gonna punch you in the face. Not literally, but like in some type of fashion.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah.
And I didn't have that. So I was figuring it out. I just think like to my contemporaneous 14-year-old self, I was being really conscious of things, but still to my older self, when I look back, I'm like, you ain't really have to like come out of the cafeteria at the upper campus and be like, yo, Ryan, what's good, bro? You know, I think you didn't really have to do that, because that was kind of out of pocket for like the environment you were in. But like also, you adding a lot of seasoning, you know, so I think it was good for everybody. You know what I mean? But I'm still like, I mean, you could chill a little bit. But also, you know what I'm saying? It's like, I don't know. I was in the Bay. It's peak hyphy movement. You know what I mean? It was a lot of energy. It was a lot of vibes. And uniquely, you know, like I was in hella different parts of the Bay.
What do you mean?
Like my basketball team, we practiced in Santa Clara.
Gotcha.
So I was down in San Jose. All my teammates were in Oakland. You know, I had hella homies in Oakland and Berkeley going to St. Mary's. So I'm going to, you know, parties in Oakland. You know what I mean? I'm in the city. All the kids that I hung out with, that was like my fam in the city, all went to Sacred Heart. So we're at all the Catholic school functions, you know, in the city. So I was really in all, it's like if you grew up in New York, you was in all the boroughs. Like people don't really do that. You know what I mean? And so I was like, oh, this shit. And I think the reality is everything was excitement. I'm like, bro, I was just out in Berkeley at the Berkeley High, you know. They was just playing the pack, bro. This shit is crazy. Like, you gotta check this out. And everyone's like, bro, I don't understand like what you're talking about. You know, I wear a uniform, I go to Catholic school. We're on some different shit because we're in San Francisco. Or like, I'm at my high school and they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, bro, I just came back from Vegas, like playing the AAU tournament. I just played Charlie Villanueva, scraped us. He got no eyebrows. You know what I'm saying? and everyone's like, what do you mean he's 6'10" shooting threes? I'm like, bro, he's 6'10" shooting threes. You've never seen this before. And you know what I mean? And my coach is like, you got to be scared of this guy from down the street in Marin. I'm like, I'm not scared of him, bro. Martell Webster just dunked on me, bro. What are you talking about? Like, I'm not scared of nothing. Like, let's go. You know what I mean? But it was just like, I think to try and catch up to all the different cultures, which is like the greatest gift, but without a guide in that, you know what I mean? And at the same time, right, like, you know, my parents divorced, you know, not divorced, but split up, you know, when I was a freshman in high school. And so not only am I all of a sudden thrust into being like, you know, the father of my family, but like I would literally go to school like on Thursday night, Wednesday, I'd have practice, I'd have game on Saturday. I wouldn't come home till Sunday. I'd just stay in Marin, you know? I'd be like, yo, let me stay on your couch, like whatever, you know? So I was really on my own, you know? What was I gonna do? Go back to my mom who's like crying. You know, I remember the first time my mom, you know, we were on food stamps and my mom went to the Safeway and cried at the cash register. You know what I'm saying? Like, when I'm gonna go back to my mom who's trying to, you know, feed us dinner, she doesn't have enough money to feed us, you know, chicken or fish, so we eat egg tacos. You know what I'm saying? I'm gonna go to her and be like, hey, by the way, I can't really figure out why these white kids don't like my sneakers.
Yeah.
She's not even gonna be able to navigate that anyway.
So as much as you enjoyed the traveling and the experience and like all the people that you were meeting at the same time, it was also like a fun escape.
Yeah, it was
for you, like not to like physically and mentally like be home.
Yeah, 100%. You know, and I didn't have to. I think the way I saw it is I wasn't a burden, you know? Like
Because
if I can feed myself,
you come home hungry as hell from a game, like that puts the pressure on somebody else to.
yeah, if I feed myself, I make sure that, and that's where that kind of, that gifted gab come in too. You know what I mean? You're like, yo, what's good?
Oh, so like work your way into certain
yeah.
situations.
You're like, yo, let me come to your house real quick.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and it's just funny. It's funny core like memories. You know what I'm saying? Like I remember going. I can't even remember whose house it was, but I can see the house in my head. Going to their house, and I'm like, hey, do you guys have any food? And they're like, no, we don't have anything, man. I mean, I guess you could check the pantry. I'm like, what's a pantry? Like, what's this
a
closet
pantry?
over here?
Yeah.
I'm like,
y'all motherfuckers.
I was like, it's a closet full of food. What you mean you got no food? He's like, yeah, but I don't know. I'm like, you don't know? I'm like, here go the pasta, here go the sauce.
Yeah.
I'm like, give me
Chef
a
it
minute.
up.
They I don't know what they're doing. I come back with plates. You know what I mean? And they're like, oh shit, this man cooking up plates. Like
That's interesting, man. When did you see advertising and this idea or dream of impact, like you being at the center of that?
yeah, that was like when I was going into my sophomore year of college. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Did you see an ad? Did you see an ad? Did you see a
well,
billboard?
I watched this documentary on PBS called The Persuaders.
Okay.
And it was just it was more on the political side, but it was just talking about the power of persuasion and how it's used in marketing and advertising.
Yeah.
And so in my head, I'm like, okay, low key creative. Okay, I could get down with that. And then I'm like, what's the worst that could happen? Like I learned how to be persuasive, and I think like again, it comes back to the Bay. Like the power of persuasion. Like we got a way to us. You know what I'm saying? Like, and if you really dig into it, this is not a hot take, even though it might sound like it. Like, the Bay is one of the most creative places, and we really do set the trends of what other people like. We just don't get credit for it.
Okay.
Like you take Tyga. I don't know if you follow Tyga, right?
Yeah.
And Tyga, now is a different thing. But
He's doing some different stuff.
Yeah, when he popped off.
Although I think he's gonna set a trend with what he's doing now too, though.
Yes, but what I'm saying is he when he popped off pre Kardashians, he had a different sound before. He was sounding all goofy and weird. Then he started sounding like he was from the Bay. Same thing with Ty Dolla $ign. He all of a sudden sounded like he was from the Bay.
He's not from the Bay?
No.
Where's he
They're
from?
from LA.
Oh,
as far as I know.
okay.
You know what I'm saying? But they were all in LA. But again, you start like it was just like it's like you got to come to the city from New Jersey to pop off. You might be dope over there. Or I'll give you a better example, right? Like one of my OG advertising teachers, a guy called Ken Mandelbaum. He worked at an agency when he got into the industry. He worked at an agency in Jersey for like a year, 2 years. Had a book, came to New York, famously. It's like, here's my book, and they were like, it's trash. Had to make a whole new book, right? Like, we have the blueprint, but we just don't connect the dots on being famous for it.
Okay.
You know what I mean? But when you start tracing it back, it's like, that's where the trends start. You know what I mean? So anyways, persuasion. And so I kind of was just like, look, what is bad? And this is the same argument I have for anyone who asks me about advertising. I meet people who are super creative. I'm like, go work in an agency. Why? You're going to get paid.
Yeah.
That's good. You're going to get health insurance. Mm-hmm. You're going to get paid to be creative.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to like twist yourself a little bit, but that's fine.
Yeah.
Ain't shit free in life. You know what I'm saying? So you want to do your side gigs, you got to do your main gig. But you're also going to learn the business of the brands.
Yeah.
And the brands are spending $1 trillion a year that they should give you to do the things you would do anyways. Like all the stuff I do in my nonprofit. It's stuff I would do. If you just gave me money and let me be a philanthropist, I would be bringing people to Cannes. I would be hosting dinners. I would be throwing activations and parties. I would be coming up and sponsoring short films. That's what I would do because it's fun and I enjoy it.
It's funny that you even called yourself low-key creative. Like not a creative, just low-key creative.
Yeah.
It's funny because I feel uncomfortable calling myself a creative.
Yeah.
Because I never thought of myself as a creative, and I always push myself, or even people push me towards like more. Like I went to school for economics. Mm-hmm. Like you went to school thinking of
that's hard.
You were going to be a doctor. You know what I mean? Those both aren't necessarily creative fields. You know what I mean? Like even at this stage, you're calling yourself a low-key creative. Why even low-key?
I mean, I don't know. I feel like that's probably a mix of, some I need to come to terms with, like, coming in and being the person that I am.
Yeah.
But I think it's one of those things, as a creative, like one of the big
There we
metrics
go.
that
There
I
we go.
have for
There we go.
yeah, one of the big metrics that I have for people when I interview them is like, what are you jealous of? Because I think creativity, it's like a bit of a vortex. Like you have to be jealous of other people. Like I remember one day I woke
Oh,
up
man, I
and
know
I was
exactly
like,
what
who
you mean.
invented do-rags?
Yeah. Oh,
I'm
yeah.
like,
I mean,
this
not for the
shit's-
do rag, but yeah, I know what you mean.
I was like, this shit is so simple. Why didn't I invent this?
Yeah,
Or like, I'll
yeah.
see someone drop a spot and I'll be tight for like 2 days. And everyone's like, what's wrong with you? I'm like, so-and-so made this spot. This shit is fire. And I'm like, yeah, I don't have that client. Like there's no way I could have made it.
Yeah.
But I'm jealous of it. And I think the other part of that is there's like a bit of a vortex around your own work. I know if my work is terrible, the difference between good and great, I'm too close to it. I can't tell. You know what I mean? I really can't tell if it's good or great. So I'm like, okay, I led Adidas for 3 years. I could say that. That's easy. I grew that business. I came in 150K. Was working on Parlay. 2 years later, we had 6 million in production in 1 month. We're doing more work than JL, than 72 and Sunny, with a team that I grew from 6 people to 40 people. I could say that with confidence. Could I tell you that the work is great? There's stuff I'm excited about, but it's really hard for me to be able to tell you. And I really think if you were to ask, like you ask Kobe about 81 points, he's gonna be like, I missed 4 free throws. You know what I mean? Like
It's one of those that it's kind of like the argument of like who's the best in any category, right? And a lot of artists say, whether you're artist or athlete, it's just like, I want to let the people decide.
Right,
Kind of thing.
right.
So it's hard for you to be like, yeah.
And I think it's like, look, when you go watch a movie, go to an art exhibit, see a painting, that is the only thing that exists. In reality, especially in commercial commodified creativity, right, advertising, there was like 100% fidelity vision of like what you wanted to do, but there's so many people in the process that it kind of just like, I mean, my partner Brandon always talks about the idiot forest, which is like, you got to like protect the idea in the idiot forest. It's not poorly intentioned people, but you as a creative are the only person who's like, this thing needs to be great from a creative integrity standpoint over all other things, right? Because, someone might be like, oh, but strategically, it would hit harder like this, or media-wise, if it was super vertical, it'd be better. And I'm like, well, maybe it needs to be circle. I know there's no phones that are circle, but like that might be the best answer, right? And that's what we're chasing, right? Because we also, I think, if you're a good creative, you understand there is one metric that will beat any KPIs, and that's when you make this shit fucking fire, right?
Yeah.
Like they'd be like, it needs to be 3 seconds long. It's got a loop.
Yeah,
You got to do until they do the thing that's the complete opposite of that, and then you're like, oh, okay, but this one, you're never supposed to put cayenne pepper in and then you're like, oh.
It's kind of like what
But
you
it hit,
said.
though.
It's kind of like what you said earlier around like rules.
There are no rules.
Yeah.
That's rule number 2.
Yeah. Like people can create these like hypothetical rules or like best practices, but until you create the best practices,
Oh my God.
until you create some shit, as long as it's fire, like it doesn't matter what the fuck the best practices are.
But yes, I think that we're in an interesting time because I think since like the early 2000s, we started having data. I don't know what happened in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s. I literally think people were just like, that seems cool, and they just did it. Because there was no feedback. Now, from 2000 to, like, the feedback is super loose, but you could post-rationalize your arguments, you know what I mean? This was great because I'm like, you don't know what people watching the Super Bowl actually thought about your spot. Yeah. You know what some people thought about your spot. You ran this research study. You did like a few of these things. But there's no way for you to really say, writ large, like you have a really good understanding of how people felt about it. Like even Rotten Tomatoes is not the end all be all because there is no objectively universal metric, right? And I say that as like an academic, a person who's run his own studies. I don't argue with strategists because I don't understand their math. I just disagree with their methodology. You know what I mean? but we started putting the cart in front of the horse. We let the data be truth instead of a tool, right? If you're a person who's run a study, you understand that you could contextualize data to pretty much say anything that you want.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And
The way that you form the questions, even before you even know, yeah, for sure.
right? Or just, okay, this data point points to, a majority liking this, but I would like to argue for the other, so I'm gonna make it a minority data point. Or I'm
Right.
gonna find a completely other data point that points in my direction. Like it's not to say it's fake, but it's a tool.
Sure.
And I think we're starting to allow that to be true.
Right.
Right? Because if you
The
went in
only
a room,
truth.
right? If you went in a room, 5 years ago, it's like someone was saying on Ad Age or Ad Week or one of these clips of one of these conferences or whatever, and they were just like, everyone goes to the Google Analytics. That doesn't mean that that's the best tool. It just means it's the easiest to access. It's like YouGov
Right.
or whatever. That's not the only way for you to figure out some shit. But if
Right.
you Google it, that's what pops up. So
Yeah, yeah.
you know what I mean? And when you think that the data is telling you the truth, now you start trying to change your creativity. Okay, well, the brief is now that this needs to be 3 seconds long, right? Remember 2015, 16, 17? It was like, brand has to be in the first 3 seconds.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We're just now
I
getting...
remember pitching that. Yeah.
Right. You're like, oh, fuck. We're just now getting to the point, you know what I mean, where you're seeing spots on TV where the reveal is at the end again, right? Because if you look at the spots that we all love, Nike tag.
I used to literally compare TV ads to how social ads would be, and it was like, we need to reverse engineer like some terrible corporate jargon around essentially like flip the script from TV from the end reveal to the beginning reveal, pretty much. Yeah,
Right.
I remember that. Yeah,
You know what I mean? And that's been so integrated, right? Like if you look at the Super Bowl spots like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, they still just like brand in the first couple seconds.
Yeah.
Now it's finally starting to like, you got them for the whole time, bro. Just give them something funny, give them a punch at the end.
Yeah.
So we're finally letting loose of this because we've gotten to the inundation. You know what I mean? It's like, I think about it like LinkedIn, like, if you hit the right time, 2005, 6, 7, you went on LinkedIn, you applied, like, boom, interview. You know what I'm saying? If you were qualified.
Sure.
Then all of a sudden it was like, it became an issue. You don't see people posting their jobs on LinkedIn now. Because you post and you get 10,000 applicants. Now I have a pile to sift through.
Yeah.
Right? That's the same thing. The data has become so inundated that people are like, I can't sift through this. Maybe AI can help me, but let me actually use some human intelligence, some intuitive intelligence.
Yeah.
Hopefully it leads to people trusting the experts, right? Like we were talking about it earlier, right? Like I think advertising is one of those uniquely fucking wild industries where you pay people millions of dollars for their expertise and then try not to listen to them at any point possible. You know what I mean? Like clients gonna pay you and they're like, okay, but creatively that's your opinion, but like, and I'm like, okay, do you tell the person at your favorite restaurant that they should recook their food?
Do you think that's just you, or just that's like a problem with advertising?
I think it's an industry problem.
Okay.
I think it's a client service orientation problem.
Okay.
I think it's a New York problem because I think having worked in lots of cities, like New York has a very client service orientation in my experience, but I think it's also a black problem. I think that when you walk in the room and you're white, like most of these rooms are, and you see Phil or Sarah or Kylie and they look like your nephew or your spouse, you feel comfortable. When they see you, they see me. They don't consciously see a threat per se. Some do, right? I had an experience the other day where I was watching a bunch of white dudes talk about ageism, and I was like, that's a really interesting, like y'all really feel like they're taking our jobs. You know what I mean? Like y'all feel like that. I don't have a judgment on it. Ageism's bad, like for the record. But the psyche of what you're worried about and how you're thinking about the next 10 years and 20 years of your life is really interesting. And that's impacting how you move and who you hire and what you allow into the room. And we're foreign. And a person like myself, right? Like, you're going to look at me, and we're a good example, right? We met on the internet.
Yeah.
You know, not on the dating site.
It sound like Usher in the Tiny Desk.
Yeah, but on the internet, and it was like, we're going to continue to look for the touch points that connect us because we know we are connected. I knew that from the beginning,
Yeah.
right? It's the same thing you ask about being a creative, and it's like, I believe black and brown people have generational creativity already in them. You don't have to think about yourself as a creative or not. That's who you are. You're going to find creative solutions. You was being creative with your economics, guaranteed, right? But I am both, and this is my perception, right? So you ask me, I know that I look different from every person in the room that I walk into, right? Maybe too fashionable, maybe too loud, right? I speak different because I could easily go from the academic side.
And are these labels that you're putting on yourself, or labels that people have put on you before?
These are labels
Too
that
loud, too fashionable, etc.
It's a mix, you know, labels I put on myself, but also like reflections that people had of me. But also, I mean, you know, I said this in like one of the little pieces for Black Week, but it's like, I think people watch their tone around me, you know? Like back to the authenticity question.
What do you mean they watch their tone around you?
I'm not necessarily the person who you're gonna say the thing that you don't think I'm alike to my face. You know what I'm saying?
Why?
I hear it.
Why is that? Why don't
know?
you think people will do that to you?
I think it's presence. You know what I mean? Like I'm also 6'3", 240.
Yeah.
You know, so
There's like a potential fear, maybe?
oh, there's a lot of fear. You know, and I think, look, you know, like I was saying, right? I am unique, which should be seen as great or can be seen as confusing, and like I think that whiteness toggles very quickly between confusion, discomfort, and threat, and kill, and they just kind of like they go back and forth. I said this, you know, at the brunch, they go back and forth, right? I walk into a room and I see what the threats are. You know what I mean? I was just talking with someone earlier. It's like I've had a gun pulled on me on multiple occasions in my life. The first time this happened to me, I was like, this person is not a threat with a gun barrel in my face. You know what I'm saying? Like I know what a threat is and what it's not. I'm not gonna all of a sudden be like, hey, you said something that was confusing to me, and so therefore I'm gonna go to a fearful place within myself, which could be conscious or unconscious. But because they toggle back and forth, when it comes down to it and they're cutting a team or lost some business, or someone comes in with a misinterpretation of what you might have done, right? Or maybe you delivered the best campaign that a brand has ever made to beat all the metrics, but another person on the client's team is like, oh, I don't think he's a good culture fit. That other person who will easily relate to the person who looks like their nephew and be like, no, that's fucking, Jimmy is a great guy. How many times you ask someone feedback about one of your teammates that was white in an office place, and the first thing they say is they're a nice person? I'm like, bro, I asked you if he could shoot jumpers in the corner. He could be nice or mean, or I didn't ask you about that. I asked you, you know what I'm saying? Can this person chop onions fast?
Yeah.
Like, he's a nice guy. Like, what kind of feedback is that? But that's you relating to that person. So when you're a person who doesn't have that type of visceral, instinctual, to them, you know, relation, oh, yeah, I don't know. Am I going to stand with you, or am I going to stand with the white person who gave negative feedback about you because they didn't understand what you were doing? Not even because you did something wrong. Right. They just didn't really understand the vibes. Because what's the culture fit? They didn't get the vibes. Yeah. You know what I mean? And that's the trickiness. You know what I mean? That's the knife's edge. You know what I'm saying? Because we all could get cut. You know what I mean? And that's the nature of business. But who gets cut?
Tell me about earlier in your career versus later in your career. Like most people, I'm not gonna put this on you, but most people when they start their career, they try to assimilate, they try to fit in, right? Because there is I don't want to lose this title. I don't want to lose an association to this brand that I'm working on, this company that I'm working for, the paycheck, the benefits, etc. I used to wait till I got at least one performance review to start dressing a certain way. Because I could be like, "Yo, what you talking about? Like, I just killed it. Like, look, I got the paper to prove that I'm doing. You know what I mean?
That's that.
Like, when did you get a sense of
oppositional gaze.
security? Because I used to base my sense of security on outside validation versus my own self-love and self-worth and blah blah blah. Like, when did you start feeling confident to be who you are, like right now? First of all, did you have that when you first started?
So like, a couple of things. I was always, I think, too different for the environments I was in since I remember, right? I was the only black kid in my class. Okay, there might have been like 1.5 other black kids.
Right.
Like my high school, we once hung out, kids from my high school, 4 black kids, 4 different classes. You never hang out with people in 4 different classes. Why y'all even know each other? It was actually 3 classes and skip one, and then one, like, y'all didn't even all go to school at the same time, type shit. You know what I'm saying? Or when I'm playing soccer and I'm the only black kid, and there's a group of white kids that kind of pay, and there's a group of Hispanic kids that play, and I'm just in the middle, right?
Yeah.
So I've always been so unique that I never really tried to be like, who's like me? I'm just more like, how do I figure out my space?
You just leaned into that uniqueness.
And I think that doubled itself down. Like, the beginning of my career, I graduate, getting no real traction, you know what I'm saying? And I'm thinking about my options, and I'm in the Bay, so I'm doing a lot of freelance, you know what I mean, copywriting, working, but I'm not getting into offices and things like that. And the long story short, then I end up, moving to Paris, where as a native English copywriter in San Francisco, everyone speaks English. As a native English copywriter in Paris, not a lot of people speak English, and not a lot of people speak English and can also speak French.
Right.
And
living Emily in Paris out there.
Right. And more than that, can understand French to the level of, I know what you're trying to say in English when you're speaking poor English in French. So you're comfortable now.
Yeah.
Right? Because when I go to a French person, and every French person is like, I speak English. And I'm like, okay, on paper, sure. That's like everyone speaks Spanish. Cameron the other day, he was like, I speak Spanish like yo lo sé. And I was like, that's not Spanish, bro. Like, stop that. You know what I mean? But then when I speak to them in French, and my accent is very Parisian, it's very, I just got, the other day I was talking with a guy from Quebec, and he was like, yeah, see, you wouldn't be able to work, in Canada. And I'm like, nah, my French is perfect. He's like, it's too Parisian, right? Like, that's my issue. But when I speak to you like that, you go, no, you get it, bro, because you like us. And I'm like, cool, so now you're comfortable, right? So I was able to get traction in my career, accelerate, get a job. But as you imagine, how many native English copywriters are in Digitas LBI in Bastille? 2? In an agency of 400 people, 500 people? You know what I'm saying? Like, how many do you need? Not a lot. There's not that much English copy,
Sure.
So I think my familiarity with just trying to, it's funny, the rhetoric around the only, which I heard a lot in 2020 and 21 when I came back to the States, and I'm the only person in the room.
That's when you came back to the States?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Like end of 2020.
Okay.
I never heard that rhetoric before, and I never really thought about it. Like, so the question you're asking.
So in France and in Europe, like, that's not necessarily like a big topic of conversation.
I don't think there's enough. First of all, the black and brown people aren't galvanized in any type of way. You know what I mean? You're not allowed to, like, legally in France, you can't ask people their race on applications for things. You know what I'm saying? So there's not the racism is there.
It's
alive
visible,
and well.
but it's not like quantifiable often.
But like if you come here and you go, that's racist, everyone goes, okay, that's racist. Out there they'd be like, nothing's racist. We're not racist. We didn't even ask you your race. Oh. I'm like, but you keep treating me different from him.
Right.
We didn't ask you your race though.
Yeah, so like, yeah, okay.
You know what I'm saying? Like, the conversation is not in the front and center. So it's hard to galvanize. And also I think the nature of Paris is super particular in the sense that there are so many, like, blackness and as an academic, right? Black for me is capital B, black, which is a culture born from no beginning, right? All different cultures from West Africa, et cetera, come to the United States. They have their culture ties cut, and then we form a new culture. So there's a universality to our experience because it's always here. A person from Benin and a person from Senegal and a person from Tahiti who all live in Paris and a person from Morocco, they are, because it's so racist and foreign and abrasive to them, they're almost more associated to where they're from, to where they're at. So they don't see themselves all as the same thing. Like it's just starting to become cohesive. So I don't even think like I was going in there, and I would, if I was anything in those rooms, I'd be the American.
Right. Interesting.
And the cool black American guy, you know. Hey, we have a client, like I remember sitting at my desk, we got a client, you know, they work for Cote d'Ingles in Spain. They want like cool, you know, something cool, right? You could do that. And in my head, I'm like, you're fucking racist. You know what I mean? But I'm like, all right, I guess. You know? And what I do have to navigate in those moments.
But that's also like a positive outcome or opportunity that comes out of the coolness.
Right. And
although it may be racist, right?
Yeah. So it's like, I don't like why you asked me, but you still ask me. And then I have to sit there and say, like, did I get opportunities on Adidas because I was perfect for it or because I was black? Yes. Right? Like, a lot of the people who initially said, I think he could do it, were just looking at the cover of the book and just being like, he could do it. Now, did they dig into, I played college basketball, I played sports my whole life, I grew up, you know, in a sports household.
Even inside the book, when you look at it on paper,
inside the book,
right,
it is 100% the answer. But you pick the book off of like the cover in a way that was like, I don't like why you picked that. And I had to navigate for myself, like, and I've said this to people all the time. I say, look, if you get into the game because they think that you're great, or you get into the game because the starter got injured, you in the game either way, and you got to play. And so I had to navigate that and deal with that, right? So I'm like, I know you're tapping me for all the wrong reasons, but I'm going to come in here and I'm going to be authentic and I'm going to be myself. I'm going to tell you when you come with an idea that's fucked off, you know, I'm going to tell you and only present you the work that I think is going to be representative and authentic.
Is that a story that you told yourself, or is that a story that someone told you? The idea of they picked me because of what's on the cover.
It's just like if you sniff and you smell fire, it's probably a fire. If you think something is racist, it's probably racist. Because if it's not racist, you're not going to think it's racist. You know what I'm saying? So I didn't really... Have I told other people the stories that have happened to me and they've reinforced them? Yes. But it was just, like, you know, as I said, I've been in these very foreign environments for a really long time. So I just know, you know, I don't have to wait till you get the pitchforks out for me to like kind of figure out. Yeah. I'm like,
It's not the same exact situation, but I hear people that have been in abusive relationships, or they've been in abusive households, right? So they're not the ones being abused. They have seen people being abused, and because of that, they're very attuned to certain actions, and they know when something is coming. I'm not saying that's exactly what happened, but it's like, I see the signals, I know what's happening here, kind of thing.
Well, how else would you describe racism than an abusive relationship?
What do you mean?
Any type of racist dynamic between a have and a have not
abusive,
is an abusive relationship, right? You're taking advantage of your, you know, social status to put down another in disproportion. That's literally abusive.
What's a time where you think your authenticity was met with resistance?
That's a good question. I think, that's a really good question. I don't know if those things are met. I don't think that's the nature of racism. I don't think it fights you head on.
Okay.
Right? Like I talk often about racism with a capital R and racism with a lowercase r.
Yeah, it's like trauma, big T, little t.
Yeah, like racism with a capital R. Hey, you're black. I don't like you. Really easy.
Right.
You're like, everyone's seen it, right?
Yeah.
Racism with a lowercase r is nascent and sneaky, you know? They don't just go say, it was you, you know what I mean? Like I once, I got accused in a meeting I wasn't even in. A meeting, it was an executive leadership meeting with the founders of an agency with the leadership of an agency, and one of the partners said I was excluding her from. She was feeling excluded because I use sports metaphors. So me being authentic to myself, right? You hired me as an athlete, a professional athlete, a college athlete, a person who ran Adidas for years. It would be quite natural for me to use sports as an analogy. It's also a metaphor. Also, women play sports. Quiet as it's kept. So I don't know how there could be a gender-based argument because of sports in and of itself, right? But that's my authenticity, because sports is authentic to me. Being met with discomfort to misunderstanding to threat to kill, because you're trying to kill me in this room that I'm not even in. You know what I mean?
That's such an interesting example.
Which is crazy, because it's like I'm like, good try with your racism, but like you didn't even use it good. Like,
all right, so last question. Despite the resistance though, like you continuing to, I mean, we all are continuing to grow, continue to get more stature, etc. Is it easier to be yourself as you go up, or is it more difficult?
yeah, it's funny. People ask me that, and they say, "Oh, it must be so much easier."
I think it's the opposite.
I don't think it's easier.
I think it's more difficult because, and people always be like, oh, like everyone represents the company. No, like as you climb, you really.
Oh, the stakes are higher.
Exactly.
First of all,
you have more to lose.
Much higher. The responsibility is higher. Mm-hmm. The ability to let people down is higher, right? Like the amount of people that wanted time from me 5 years ago and the amount of people that want time from me now, way higher. And I want to give time to everybody, but I just, like I said, when you walked in, you happened to walk in the building, Damien was in here, Chris was in here, and I had it, it's not on purpose, it's just, that's what happened. I rock with all y'all. You deserve my time. I got to figure it out. I think also, the thing is, I don't think it's easier for me to be myself, and I don't think I do it at any less frequency or with any less consciousness of how dangerous it is. But I do have more allies that I place around the chessboard, so that when someone is in that room chatting shit about me, maybe back in the day there was no one that would tell me, and now maybe there's 3 people that would tell me.
And maybe stand up for you. But that's another layer, yeah.
Mashallah.
Mi gente, that wraps up another episode of the Can't Do It podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard, please do us a favor. Like, share, comment wherever you're listening to this episode. Be sure to follow, subscribe, and leave us a rating and review if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Thank you, and see you next time.